I had just worn black to bury my husband when they showed up with measuring tape for my home. I never thought things would move so fast. Frank, my husband of 47 years, had only been gone a few days. I hadn't even folded up the black dress I wore to his funeral. The teacup he used every morning was still sitting in the sink, waiting to be washed. And yet, that afternoon, as I watered the lavender on the porch, a stranger showed up at the end of my walkway. He had a cap on a clipboard in one hand and measuring tape in the other. I overheard him speaking with my daughter-in-law, Brianna, cheerful and bold. "Wow, your house is huge. With some renovations, you could get a great price. By the way, is the deed in your name?" I froze. I stood there in silence, watching that stranger measure the walls, the door frames the same ones Frank used to lean against while reading the paper. "And Brianna," she laughed, hands on her hips. "Yeah, it's an old build but solid bones. We're hoping to sell fast, so we'll keep the price low." Not one of them looked at me. Not one of them asked Mom, "Are you ready to sell the house?" Because in their eyes, I was just the last person left in this home, and apparently I no longer had a voice. About 10 minutes later, Lucas, my son, walked in. He placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, like he was about to share good news. "Mom, we think it's best to sell. It's not safe for you to live here alone anymore. Brianna and I found a wonderful senior living facility, clean, comfortable, full-time staff. You won't have to worry about anything." I looked at him. The little boy who used to hold my hand on the way to school was now trying to push me out of the home I had poured my life into. I said nothing. I just nodded quietly. Because in that moment, I knew what I needed to do. They didn't know. They had no idea. They didn't know Frank had already transferred everything to my name. This house, our 2-story red brick home with lavender blooming on the porch, had been mine for 5 years. He transferred the deed after a minor stroke landed him in the hospital. Frank had told me, "I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know you'll keep everything where it belongs." It wasn't just the house. Frank had also placed the entire ownership of the family business under my name, the same business Lucas thought he controlled. And then, there was the $8 million, money Frank had quietly invested in a private fund under my name with oversight by our longtime attorney, Mr. Lyman. I'm not a fighter. I've never been someone who looks for conflict. I believed in family. I believed kindness would be returned with gratitude. But the moment they stood on my lawn, talking property values, timelines, and which room to convert into a guest office for resale, while casually discussing which nursing home I'd be moved into, like I was a piece of old furniture, that was the moment I knew something had to change. That evening, they acted like everything was normal. Lucas grilled steaks. Brianna poured red wine. They spoke about my retirement getaway, as if it were some exciting vacation. They chatted about how the money from selling the house would help expand the company, how Brianna had a fresh idea for a second branch. I sat there quietly listening, watching the spark in my son's eyes as he talked about his big plans as if it were his legacy. A legacy built on something that was never his. Without a word, I reached for my phone under the table and sent a single text to Mr. Lyman urgent. "Freeze all asset transfers, house and company shares. Call me when you get this." Less than 10 minutes later, he replied, "Done. They can't sell what doesn't belong to them." I stood up and poured myself another glass of wine. Brianna looked at me with a smile. "You should drink a little, Mom. It's a celebration." I smiled back, but in my mind, one sentence echoed over and over. "You just sold something that was never yours. The game has only just begun. I don't know how far I'll go in this journey. I don't know how they'll react when they realize everything was in my hands all along. But I do know one thing: I'm not staying silent anymore. I was once the woman behind the man. I was once the mother who only worried about her son. But now I am the woman standing between what I've protected all my life, and I won't let anyone take it from me without a fight. They thought I'd quietly walk away. They thought I didn't understand the law. They thought I was too old to stand my ground. They were wrong. Some days I pretend to be forgetful, just to see who's being honest with me. I used to think if I were gentle enough, patient enough, our family would stay peaceful. I used to believe if I stepped back, gave up the front yard, the kitchen, the family business, my children would feel grateful. But I learned that when you keep stepping back, you eventually disappear. Frank, my husband, always kind and soft-spoken, once whispered to me after a routine checkup, "You should have everything in your name." Not because I don't trust Lucas, but because I know people can change when money gets involved. I laughed. I said, "After all we've worked for, do we really need to protect ourselves from each other?" Frank didn't argue. He just sighed like he always did, and quietly made the decisions he believed were right. A few months later, I was asked to sign a thick stack of documents. Near the bottom of one page in tiny print it said, "Transfer of property ownership and all corporate shares to Mrs. Helen M. Evans." Frank didn't ask for my permission. He just needed me to know I trust you to protect what we built. For years after I lived like the perfect old-fashioned wife, I never meddled in the business, never touched the finances. I focused on the garden, the kitchen, and keeping Frank warm when the weather turned cold. Lucas grew busier as time passed. He spoke to me in that rational tone he'd learned somewhere Mom let us handle things. "Finance and tech, it's all changed. You wouldn't understand." I nodded. Not because I didn't understand, but because I wanted peace in the house. Truth is, I understood more than they ever guessed. Yes, I'm old. Yes, I've slowed down. But I've never been senile, only pretending to be. I dropped my keys in front of Brianna once just to see if she'd pick them up. She didn't. I asked Lucas the name of an old employee 3 times just to see if he'd get frustrated. He did. I forgot Brianna's birthday and overheard her whisper to Lucas, "I think your mom's starting to lose it. We should move her into care while she's still manageable." I heard it all. I even recorded it. Since the day Frank passed, I've been more cautious. I keep my phone in my shirt pocket recording whenever they're around. One time, Lucas and Brianna argued about not having enough money to open a new branch. Brianna said, "We just need to sell the house. Your mom doesn't need much. Just give her a small room in a care home. Easy." I was upstairs on the balcony watering my plants. I didn't cry. I just quietly adjusted my earbuds to make sure the audio came through clearly. They say I'm old. They're not wrong, but they forget something old doesn't mean stupid. Frank once told me growing old is like playing chess. Every move must be calm. No rushing, but no blindness either. How many moves have I made? I lost count. But I know the game isn't over, and I haven't lost. One afternoon, I passed by the living room while Brianna was on the phone. She didn't see me, or maybe she didn't care. I heard her tell her friend, "She's losing it seriously. Keeps talking about the past." Once she even thought Frank was still alive. Creepy, right? I smiled faintly. Frank is still alive, in the way I've protected everything he left behind. I used to think the $8 million in the trust fund was just an emergency cushion for medical bills, or maybe helping someone in the family someday. But now I know it's the only lifeline left in a family drifting away from love. I started keeping a journal again, not to complain, just to document every sentence, every backhanded comment, every fake smile. I organized the notes on my phone. Lucas, company meeting, said Mom should be in care. Brianna, appraiser visit March 14th. Anonymous call, plan to sell old furniture. I backed everything up on a separate drive, not because I need legal proof, but because I need the truth. And the truth must first be clear to me. One day, Lucas handed me a printed document. "Just need your signature, Mom. It's the consent form to transfer the house. Don't worry about the details, I'll handle everything." I smiled. I took the file and opened it slowly. I didn't read it word for word, because I already knew exactly what it was. I folded it neatly and placed it back on the table. "I'll need a few days to think about it," I said. Lucas nodded, thinking I was hesitating because of my age. But the truth was, I had a meeting scheduled with Mr. Lyman, Frank's old attorney, the one who still sends me a Christmas card every year without fail. That night, I lay in bed holding our wedding photo. I looked into Frank's eyes, calm, trusting, and I whispered mostly to myself I never touched that money, because I believed our family still had kindness in it. But today I'll use it not out of anger, but because I can't let this betrayal go on any longer. I'm going to see Mr. Lyman. I'm going to put everything back in the right place. I don't need to yell. I don't need revenge. I just need to protect what's rightfully mine. I used to stay quiet thinking softness was how families stayed close. But if their hearts aren't soft, then I don't need to be soft anymore. To hold power and not use it meant I still had hope for family, but they destroyed that. That morning in Seattle, it was drizzling, just a soft, cold mist. I wrapped myself in a beige overcoat and wore the felt hat Frank gave me for our 35th anniversary. Then I boarded the familiar bus headed to Fremont. Almost no one noticed the quiet old lady with silver hair carrying a cloth tote as she walked into a dusty little bookstore called Page Turner's, the same place where many years ago Frank once read me love poems in a dim corner that smelled like old pages. We used to sneak away to that corner for secret dates in our youth. Now I chose that same spot to prepare for a different kind of affair, a war. Mr. Lyman was already waiting with black coffee and a thick folder on the table. His hair was grayer than before, but his eyes were still sharp, just as I remembered from the first time Frank brought me to his office, right after he was diagnosed with cancer, to talk about protecting our assets. "Good morning, Mrs. Evans," he said, rising to greet me with both hands. "I was afraid you wouldn't come." I smiled faintly. "If I hadn't, the kids would have sold the house by now." He grimaced. "Yes, I've heard. Lucas and his wife too hasty." I nodded and pulled an old notebook from my bag. It was packed with handwritten notes, dates, conversations, and a scanned copy of the property deed with my name on it. I had kept it all hidden for years, thinking I'd never need to use it. But now things were different. "I want to do two things," I said, placing the notebook on the table. "First, freeze all company accounts. If Lucas or Brianna attempts to withdraw funds without my signature, block it immediately." Lyman nodded, opening his laptop. "Under the agreement made before Mr. Frank passed, you're the final co-owner of the financial trust. Second," I continued slowly, "I want to register the house as a personal, non-transferable asset. No changes unless I sign off formally." Lyman paused, studying me. "I honestly thought you'd forgive them." I looked out the rain-speckled window. I remembered the morning after Frank's funeral, Lucas walked into my room without knocking. He handed me a document titled Suggested Property Transfer Agreement, saying, "Mom, now that Dad's gone, this house is too big for just one person. Brianna and I are planning to turn it into a small office. No, how are you? No condolences, just talk of houses, businesses, and ownership." I turned back to Lyman. "I did forgive them, but that doesn't mean I'll let them do it again." He stayed quiet for a beat, then smiled lightly. "Frank was right to trust you with all this. But this won't be an easy fight." "I know," I replied, "but I've got nothing left to lose except my self-respect." After our meeting, I headed home in silence. On the bus ride back to Magnolia, I unlocked my phone and deleted every old message from Lucas. I had no reason to keep those cold, calculated words anymore. When I walked in, Brianna was lounging on the sofa, laughing while scrolling on her phone. She glanced up and said in her sugar-sweet tone, "Where'd you go, Mom? I was just about to ask if we could clear out the third floor. We're thinking of turning it into a meeting room." I smiled. "Sure, go take a look. There's all kinds of interesting things up there." That night, I overheard Lucas whispering to Brianna in the kitchen. I sat still, holding our old wedding album, listening. "The lawyer said the accounts were frozen." "Are you sure she doesn't know impossible? We played it so well. She's not sharp enough anymore. She's old." I closed the album, my expression calm. "I'm not old, Lucas, not in the way you think. I used to believe that if I appeared weak, my children would feel compelled to protect me. But now I understand some lessons can't be learned through tears, only through loss." The next morning, I received an email from Lyman Accounts Frozen. "Property registration in progress. We're ready for the next step whenever you are." I stared at the screen and smiled to myself. The next step, he said, I haven't even started yet. I had never sat at a dinner table where the golden lights felt so cold. The chandelier above cast a warm glow, at least it was supposed to. But under that light, everything on the table looked pale hollow. The table was perfectly set, fresh flowers, red wine, and the barbecued ribs I once taught Brianna to make. But I knew exactly what this was. This wasn't a family dinner. It was a carefully staged performance, and I was the last character left before the curtain fell. Lucas stood up, raising his glass. "Mom, Tonight, Brianna and I just wanted to thank you for everything, for standing by Dad, for not resisting when I wanted to steer the company in a new direction, and for being so understanding. I looked straight into my son's eyes. His voice was gentle, eerily like his father's once was. But in those eyes, I saw nothing, just a polished void. Frank, if you were still here, you'd see through that lie in an instant. Brianna always knew how to say the right things, too. You're incredibly gracious, Mom. Not many women your age understand it's time to rest, to let the younger generation take over. And you didn't cling to anything. We're truly grateful for that. She smiled as she clinked her glass with mine, a gesture that 10 years ago might have warmed my heart. But now it felt like cheap icing, covering up the stale taste of disrespect and greed. I said nothing. I simply bowed my head like I had done so many times in recent months. They thought I was old. They thought I was tired. They thought I was too broken to ever rise again. I let them enjoy a few more bites, let the small talk fade. Then I reached into the pocket of my sweater and pulled out my phone. I have a little gift I'd like to give you, I said softly. I opened the voice recorder, pressed play, and Brianna's voice filled the room clear as glass. If that old hag would just move out, the house would smell better. Always that scent of pills and mothballs. Living with her is like being stuck in a mini nursing home. Lucas said she's going senile. Let her think we love her. We'll sell the house in no time as long as she keeps quiet. Let's throw her a fake thank you dinner, say a few sweet lines. She eats up fake affection. Easy. No one moved. No forks scraped plates. No one chewed another bite. I raised my head, looked each of them in the eyes. Lucas froze, gripping his wine glass like it might shatter. Brianna had turned white, her lips twitching as if searching for an excuse, but no words came out. I set the phone on the table, calm as if I'd just played a Mozart sonata. That is what I heard I said. No yelling, just words as sharp as a blade. You think I'm old. You think I'm senile. You think I'll just sit back and watch you throw me out of the home your father and I built for over 40 years. I paused to breathe, not out of anger, but sorrow. Sorrow that I had once held onto hope. Hope for gratitude. Hope for family. You know, Lucas, I said quietly, your father once told me, Helen, what I fear most is that when I'm gone, you'll be left with people who don't know how to love. He was right. I stood up, slowly, deliberately. You want me to leave? I will. Brianna let out a quiet breath, relieved, until I added, but I won't be leaving this house. I'll be leaving the fake family the two of you tried to create. From my coat pocket, I pulled out an envelope. I placed it on the table. Inside, a copy of the property deed updated 2 weeks ago by me and Lyman. Private asset. Not to be sold, transferred, or used as collateral without the written consent of the owner, Helen Carter. This house is mine. You live here because I allow it. And now I have no reason to allow that anymore. I walked away from the table, leaving behind a silence heavier than smoke, and colder than the untouched ribs. That night, I sat alone in Frank's study. The wedding photo still hung on the wall, me in a lace dress, him in a black suit. His eyes in that photo held the gaze of a man who believed in lasting love. I held the recorder, gently running my fingers over its smooth surface like it held a secret. I hadn't wanted to use it. I had hoped right until the end that I was wrong, that my children hadn't truly become that heartless. But the truth has its own sound. And once it echoes, no one can pretend they didn't hear it. They never imagined that silence could carry so much power. Just 1 week after the thank you dinner for Mom full of pretense, the real storm began for Lucas and Brianna. The family company, once Frank's life's work and now run by Lucas, suddenly had all its business accounts frozen by the bank. Partners couldn't transfer payments, employees weren't paid, and the supply chain came to a standstill. Lucas panicked. He called everywhere, but the bank accounts had been locked at the request of the legal co-owner, his mother. Why would you do this to me? Mom, Lucas screamed into the phone, but the only reply was a cold dial tone. That morning, Lucas rushed to the nursing home, the one he once placed his mother in for a break, as Brianna had called it. But the room was empty. Helen had checked out early that morning, paid everything in full, and left a white envelope on the bed. Inside was a handwritten letter in purple ink, the same color Helen and Frank had once used to sign documents. Lucas, your father's assets weren't just the company, the house, or the money. His greatest asset was the trust he placed in me, and his hope that you would be the one to preserve it. But you used affection as a tool of manipulation. You called me a burden, then turned around asking for my signature like it was just another item on a list. Son, I never needed you to love me perfectly. But at the very least, I hoped you wouldn't erase the role of the woman who built all this alongside your father. I'm leaving now, and I'm taking with me what's mine, including control. Lucas dropped the letter. His legs collapsed into the small folding chair in the corner of her room. The face of a 40-year-old man no longer held anger, only emptiness. Brianna, however, couldn't keep calm. As soon as she heard the news, she called Helen nonstop phone calls, messages, even voice notes. Mom, please, tell me what you want. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Just sign back the company rights. Please, Mom. Helen stared at the messages lighting up her screen. She said nothing. She sat quietly in her new private apartment window open to the soft golden afternoon sun. Once, I only wished they could love me imperfectly. Now, I just wish they wouldn't treat me like a shadow. The phone kept vibrating. Helen turned it off. A firm decision, the same way she once cut through the pain that had silently bound her for years. She brewed a pot of tea, opened a journal, and wrote the first line of her new plan. Phase 1, reclaim what is mine. Phase 2, live as if I had never been diminished. And she smiled. Not out of revenge, but because finally she was standing exactly where her husband had always believed she belonged. I left not with hatred, but with the autonomy I had lost for far too long. I stood before the house that once was a home one Frank and I built with love and trust. It was no longer a place I could return to, but I held no grudge. I had learned to let go without being dragged by invisible chains of hurt. After the company collapsed, and both Lucas and Brianna broke under the chaos, I quietly sold the house. Ironically, the final sale price was much higher than what Lucas had once listed with brokers. A young businessman enamored with the house's timeless charm made the purchase without a single word of negotiation. As we signed the contract, I asked him one question. Do you have a family? He nodded. And I'll never forget who helped me build it. I smiled. For the first time in years. I felt weightless, freed from burdens no one else ever saw. I moved to a small but elegant apartment by the southern sea. The balcony opened out onto endless blue, mornings with books and the sound of waves, afternoons soaking my feet in warm sun, evenings with soft jazz. I hired a personal chef not out of luxury, but so that no meal would again become a place to hide knives behind sweet words. I returned to long-forgotten hobbies, handwritten letters, orchid gardening, and quietly observing others without bitterness in my gaze. The $8 million I hadn't even spent half. Most went into establishing the Frank Hughes Foundation, offering scholarships to underprivileged law students. I didn't want that money to be just another padlock on my family's heart. I wanted it to open doors for those who needed a hand, a chance, a belief. I made no announcement, gave no defense to the rumors Lucas and Brianna began to spread. If they wanted to call me cold-blooded, ungrateful, or an unforgiving old woman, I let them. Because when you know who you are, you don't need to justify yourself to those who only see you as a tool. One day, I received a letter from Lucas. 3 handwritten pages. It included regret, but no apology. Memories of his childhood, but no admission of guilt. I folded it. Did not reply. Some things, only silence can echo back to the conscience of those who need to listen. I live simply now, but every moment has value. No one controls me. No one demands I be reasonable. I drink tea at 9 a.m. instead of rushing to clear the table for a daughter-in-law. I go to the spa on Tuesdays, read novels on Sunday nights. I had lived like a servant in my own life for so long that when I finally became my own master again, it almost felt wrong. But I've come to understand there is nothing wrong with choosing happiness. One evening, I looked out at the sea. In the salty breeze and soft sunlight, I slowly wrote a few lines in my journal, not for anyone else to read, but for me to remember. I once thought family was the one place you didn't need to guard your heart. That love alone was enough. But I've learned, betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from those you gave everything to and kept nothing for yourself. I don't need to demand justice. I am justice. I don't need to be loved, not if love comes with terms. I've forgiven not to comfort them, but to free myself. Another evening, I saw a young girl waiting outside my apartment, holding a scholarship file from the Frank Foundation. She shyly said, "I just wanted to thank you. Without this, I wouldn't have dared to keep studying law." My mother always said the best lawyers are the ones who understand fault isn't always one-sided. I smiled, gently invited her in, poured her a cup of tea. "You know, I said people talk about justice as something far away, but it begins with our daily choices. To be kind, to be honest, to choose not to repeat the same mistakes." She nodded, and in her eyes I saw something I once had at her age, faith. Now, I don't need anyone to tell me I deserve a good life. I know I do. No social approval needed. No child's permission required. I don't need a house. I need a life. And I have it now not because I fought back with lawsuits or vengeance, but because I finally understood silence isn't weakness. Letting go isn't surrender. Forgiveness doesn't mean return. I went to find myself, and I did.